"Get off my land," I yelled, my voice cracking with frustration as I stared at 50 strangers sprawled across my lakefront property, firing up a BBQ like they owned the place. This wasn't just any land, it was my grandfather's legacy, the one thing he left me. But Karen, our HOA president, with a smile as fake as her tan, had declared it community property while I was away. When I called her out, she didn't even flinch. She just dialed the cops, claiming I'd threatened her. That's when I knew I had to do something unforgettable. I built something so bold, so in your face, that every single day, at just the right moment, it would burn a reminder of her greed into her eyes. It was late June, a Saturday morning like any other. I was savoring my coffee, gazing at the lakes shimmer through my kitchen window, when I spotted them 15 strangers pitching tents, firing up grills, and acting like my backyard was their personal campground. My heart raced. This wasn't the first time I'd found trespassers, but this was next-level audacity. Tents, music blasting from a portable speaker, kids darting around, and the smell of burgers sizzling at 8 a.m. I set my mug down, took a deep breath to keep my cool, and marched outside. No way was I letting this slide. "Excuse me," I called, forcing a polite tone despite my rising anger. "This is private property. You'll need to pack up and leave." A guy in cargo shorts spun around, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Private property? Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any run-ins with an HOA. We'll narrate your story on our channel." Mrs. Karen from the HOA said this is community space now. She gave us permission to use it for our family reunion. My jaw nearly hit the ground. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" The man pulled out his phone and showed me a message. "See, she sent this to our neighborhood group chat, said, the lakefront is now community property and we can reserve it for events." I felt my hands start to shake as I read the message. It was indeed from Karen, complete with a schedule showing my lakefront booked solid for the next 3 months. "Wait," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I never gave permission for this. This is my land. My grandfather left it to me. There must be some mistake." The man shrugged apologetically. "Look, I don't want any trouble. Maybe you should talk to Mrs. Karen," she said. "This was all sorted out at the last HOA meeting I left them there." What else could I do without looking like the bad guy and march straight to Karen's house? She lived 3 houses down in a McMansion that screamed I peaked in high school. Her lawn was artificially perfect with those creepy garden gnomes that seemed to judge you as you walked by. I rang the doorbell repeatedly until she answered, wearing a silk robe at 9 o'clock in the morning and holding a mimosa. "Oh, Marcus," she said with that fake smile that never reached her eyes, "what brings you here so early? Is everything all right?" I struggled to keep my voice level. "Karen, there are 15 people having a reunion on my property. They said you'd told them it was community space. What's going on?" She took a long sip of her mimosa before answering clearly, enjoying my distress. "Oh, that yes, we voted on it at the HOA meeting 3 months ago. The lakefront is now community property. Didn't you get the memo?" She walked to her entry table and pulled out a folder, extracting a document with theatrical precision. "See right here, motion to convert underutilized lakefront property to community recreational space passed." Unanimously, I stared at the paper in disbelief. I wasn't at that meeting. I was visiting my sick mother in Colorado. Karen's smile widened. Well, according to HOA bylaws, absence counts as agreement. You should really read the rules, Marcus. Besides, she added with a dismissive wave, you already verbally agreed to share during the spring festival. Remember when those lovely families asked if they could take photos by the water, and you said sure, enjoy the view, we have witnesses. My mind raced back to that day. I had said that when a few families asked if they could take Easter photos by the lake, it was supposed to be a one-time thing, a neighborly gesture. That's not what I meant, and you know it, I said through gritted teeth. I was being polite. I never agreed to give up my property rights. Karen's expression hardened. Look, Marcus, this is what's best for the community. That lakefront has been sitting there unused, while families in this neighborhood have nowhere to gather. Stop being selfish. As she started to close the door, I put my foot in the way. This isn't over, Karen. That's my land, my grandfather's land. She leaned in close, and I could smell the alcohol on her breath. Despite the early hour, possession is 9/10 in of the law, Marcus, and right now the community possesses it. Have a nice day. The door slammed in my face. As I walked back to my house, I passed old Walt Murphy, watering his roses. He lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone, and had seen every HOA drama unfold. He shook his head as I approached. Saw the circus on your lawn, he said, without preamble. Let me guess, Karen's latest power play. I nodded, too frustrated to speak. Walt set down his hose and fixed me with a serious look. I warned you, boy, HOA bends rules like they bend spoons. But that woman, she doesn't just bend them, she rewrites them. Saw her do the same thing to the Johnsons 5 years ago with their side yard. They ended up moving. What can I do? I asked desperately. Walt glanced around to make sure no one was listening. You need to dig into those property papers your granddad left. Man was smart as a whipbet. He left you more than just land. He patted my shoulder. And Marcus, don't let your anger make you stupid. That's what she's counting on. I spent the rest of the day in my home office, pulling out every document from my grandfather's estate outside. The family reunion continued, their laughter and music, a constant reminder of my violation as the sun set. They finally left, but not before leaving trash scattered across my once pristine lawn. I stood at my window, looking at the mess, when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. In the distance, near the waterline, Karen was installing something. I grabbed my binoculars and focused. It was a sign, a large professional sign. Even from here, I could make out the words, Lakeside Community Recreation Area. But it was the smaller text that made me see red. Established March 2025, March 3 months ago. When I was gone, this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This had been planned. Karen had waited until I was out of town to hold that vote. She'd orchestrated this whole thing. But as she walked away from her newly installed sign, I noticed something else. Why were there already 50 people signed up for tomorrow's community lakefront tours? This was bigger than just giving away my land. Something didn't add up, and when I found out her little secret, everything would change. By the way, what would you do if someone just claimed your backyard? Comment below while I show you what I discovered next. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. If Karen wanted to play games with property rights, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I grabbed my camera and headed down to the lakefront before sunrise, hoping to document the damage from yesterday's party. What I found there made me stop in my tracks. Hidden behind a cluster of trees, partially obscured by strategic landscaping, was another sign. This one was older, weathered, and had clearly been there for months. Lakeside Community Recreation Area, established March 2025. It read with a whole list of rules and regulations below, but it was the fee schedule that caught my eye. Day use $20 per family, overnight camping $50 per night, event hosting HOA office for pricing. My hands shook as I took photos. This wasn't just about community space. This was about money. I was still processing this discovery when I heard voices approaching. I quickly ducked behind some bushes as Karen appeared, leading a group of at least 50 people. She was dressed like a real estate agent, showing $1 million property, complete with a branded polo shirt and clipboard. Welcome, everyone, to our exclusive Lakefront community area, she announced in her fake, cheerful voice. As you can see, we have 3 acres of pristine waterfront, perfect for your summer gatherings. The HOA has worked hard to secure this space for our residents' enjoyment. A woman in the group raised her hand. How much for a family barbecue? Karen smiled broadly. For HOA members, it's just a $20 maintenance fee per session. Non-residents can enjoy our facilities for $50. What a bargain for this kind of waterfront access. I nearly choked. She was charging people to use my land, my inheritance, my grandfather's legacy. The tour continued with Karen pointing out various amenities: the fire pit someone had built without permission, the picnic tables that had appeared overnight, even a small shed that I'd never seen before were also available for special events. Karen continued: weddings, corporate retreats, birthday parties. We've had such wonderful feedback from the events we've hosted so far. Events, plural. How long had this been going on? As the group moved further down the shoreline, I slipped out of my hiding spot and ran back to my house. I needed legal help. A property lawyer who'd helped me with my grandfather's estate, she answered on the third ring. Marcus, it's been a while. How can I help you? I explained the situation as calmly as I could, though I'm sure she could hear the rage in my voice. Alina listened without interrupting, occasionally making small noises of surprise or disgust. When I finished, she let out a long whistle that's bold even for an HOA. First things first. Good, check if there's any mention of agricultural use or farming rights. If your grandfather's property was designated for agricultural use before the HOA existed, you might have what's called a grandfather clause. Those override HOA regulations, but won't the HOA try to stop me from doing anything? I asked. Not if it's an agricultural fence, Alina explained. Agricultural structures have different rules. They're protected under state law. Send me all your paperwork, deed, HOA bylaws, everything. And Marcus, document everything Karen's doing. Take photos, videos, get witness statements. We're going to need evidence. I spent the next 2 days following houses, even a small concert. She'd turned my lakefront into her personal cash cow. The breaking point came during what were vendor booths, a stage with live music, even portable toilets. It was like a county fair had erupted on my grandfather's land. I took photos and videos of everything, especially the moments when I saw people handing cash to Karen's assistant. No receipts, no paper trail, just envelopes of money disappearing into a locked box the next morning. Despite the leave no trace signs Karen had posted, but it was what I found near the old oak tree that broke me. My grandfather's handmade birdhouse, the last thing he'd built before his arthritis got too bad lay in pieces on the ground. Someone had used it as a batting practice target. I knelt down, gathering the splintered wood with shaking hands. This wasn't just vandalism, this was desecration. My grandfather had spent weeks on that birdhouse, his gnarled hands carefully carving each detail. Despite the pain, I'd watched him work, seen him smile through the discomfort, because he wanted to create something beautiful for the birds he loved watching. And now it was destroyed, another casualty of Karen's greed. I marched to Karen's house, the broken pieces in my hands, rage clouding my judgment. She answered the door with her usual fake smile, but it faltered when she saw what I was holding. "Oh my," she said with mock concern, "is that your little birdhouse? How unfortunate. You know how kids can be at festivals." "This was my grandfather's," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "The last thing he ever made," I shouted, finally losing control. "It's my land." Her expression turned cold. "Lower your voice. I feel threatened. I'm calling the police." Within minutes, 2 officers arrived. Karen had worked herself into a theatrical state, claiming I'd come to her door, shouting and waving wooden pieces at her. The officers, clearly tired of neighborhood drama, separated us to get our stories. "Sir," the younger officer said to me, "I understand you're upset about property damage, but you can't come to someone's door and threaten them." "I didn't threaten anyone," I protested. "I just wanted her to take responsibility for what happened on my land." The older officer sighed. "Look, this sounds like a civil matter. HOA dispute, right? You'll need to handle this through proper channels." As they prepared to leave, the older officer pulled Karen aside. I heard him say, Karen's face flushed, "I don't appreciate the implication." The driver got out looking frustrated. He hadn't seen me yet, as he walked up to Karen's door and rang the bell. When she answered, I heard him say, "Hey, Mrs. Peterson, I'm here to pick up my equipment from yesterday, also about that fee." Karen glanced at me, still standing there, and tried to close the door. "This isn't a good time," she hissed, but the driver was already continuing. "Yeah, $200 cash for a spot at the community event. That's pretty steep. My buddy runs the taco truck, and he said you've been charging him the same every weekend. Kind of pricey for public land, don't you think?" My blood ran cold. $200 cash every weekend. Karen slammed the door in the driver's face, but it was too late. I'd heard everything. As I walked back to my house, the driver called out to me, "Hey man, you know when she'll be available? I really need my generator back." I turned to him slowly. "That event yesterday, how long has she been charging vendors to set up there?" He shrugged. "All summer, at least started. And me, I think it goes straight in her pocket. You, HOA, folks are weird about your rules." That's my land," I said quietly. "She's charging people to use my land." The driver's eyes widened. "Oh snap, you're the guy who actually owns the lakefront." "Dude, I thought you knew about this," she said. "It was all approved by the property owner." What he revealed next changed everything. Have you ever had that moment when you realize you've been played? Tell me below, because what I discovered made me realize this wasn't about community at all. I stood there in Karen's driveway, trying to process what the food truck driver had just told me. My mind was racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed information, and this guy might be my key to understanding the full scope of Karen's scheme. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "but I genuinely had no idea this was happening. I've been out of town a lot lately, family medical issues. Could you tell me more about these fees?" The driver, whose name tag read Mike, looked uncomfortable, but also sympathetic. "Man, that's messed up. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of HOA drama, but if that's really your land, you should know what's been going on. We walked over to his food truck, and Mike pulled out a notebook. I keep track of all my expenses, he explained, flipping through pages. See, here, every weekend since May, $200 to set up at the Lakeside community area, cash only. She said it was for maintenance and insurance. He showed me entry after entry, each one like a knife in my gut. And it's not just me, Mike continued. Is the ice cream truck, the taco guys, the kettle corn lady, probably 10 or 12 vendors, rotating through weekends, some of the bigger events. She charges $500 for a premium spot. I did quick math in my head. If she was charging May, we were talking about tens of thousands of dollars. That's illegal. I said the words, coming out as barely more than a whisper. Mike nodded gravely. Yeah, I figured something was sketchy when she insisted on cash only. No receipts, no paper trail. Just hand her an envelope, and she lets you set up. Some of the guys started calling it Karen's tax. He paused, then added, the really messed up part. She told us the property owner was some rich guy who lived overseas and didn't care about the land. Said you were happy to let the community use it as long as the HOA managed everything. I felt sick. Not only was she stealing my land, she was slandering me to justify it. Did anyone ever question this? HOA documents, meeting minutes, even a supposed agreement from the landowner. Looking back, I bet she forged all of it. I thanked Mike for his honesty and asked if he'd be willing to provide a written statement. He agreed, giving me his business card. Happy to help, man. Nobody likes getting scammed. As Mike drove away, I noticed several neighbors had been watching our conversation from their windows. Word would spread fast. Good, let Karen sweat a little. I went back to my house and started making calls. First, to Alina, to update her on this new development. She was audibly shocked. She's running a business on your property without permission. That's not just trespassing. Everything. Can you get statements from other vendors? I assured her I would work on it. Then I made another call, this one to my cousin who worked in forensic accounting. If Karen was hiding tens of thousands in cash, there had to be a trail somewhere. Over the next few days, I played detective. I reached out to vendors, collected statements, took photos of cash exchanges from my window. The pattern was clear. Karen had turned my lakefront into her personal ATM, but she'd been smart about it. Nothing was in writing. No contracts, no official HOA documentation about vendor fees, just cash in envelopes and verbal agreements. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered. She'd been charging for everything. $50 a night for camping, $500 for premium event hosting. She even had a photography permit fee of $75 for professional photographers who wanted to use the scenic backdrop. One photographer told me he'd paid over $2,000 in the past 6 months alone for various shoots. Beautiful location. He'd said, though, that HOA lady drives a hard bargain. As I compiled evidence, I found myself going through my grandfather's old files, looking for anything that might help my case. That's when I found it hidden in the back of a filing cabinet in a folder marked Farm Days. Was a treasure trove of documents I'd never seen before. The original deed from 1952 designating the land as agricultural permits for various farm structures, tax records showing agricultural exemptions, and most interesting, a thick notebook filled with my grandfather's sketches and plans. I sat on the floor of my office, carefully turning the yellowed pages. My grandfather had been more than just a farmer. He'd been an engineer before he bought this land. The notebook was filled with detailed drawings of irrigation systems, barn designs, and fence configurations. One section was labeled Perimeter Defense Against Deer and showed various fence designs he'd considered, but it was the last few pages that made me pause. The sketches were dated just a year before he died, when his arthritis was so bad he could barely hold a pencil yet. He'd painstakingly drawn out plans for an elaborate fence system. The notes in the margins were hard to read, but I could make out phrases like sun angle calculation and reflective properties for crop protection. There was even a small note that read, remember, 42 optimal for western exposure. At the bottom of the final page, in shaky handwriting, he'd written, "This land fed our family for 3 generations. Protect it. Marcus, use your head, not your fists. Sometimes the best defense looks like nothing special to those who don't understand." I sat there for a long time, holding that notebook. My grandfather had seen this coming, maybe not Karen specifically, but the threat of someone trying to take what was ours, and he'd left me the tools to fight back. I called Alina immediately. "I found something," I said, excitement creeping into my voice. "My grandfather's land has agricultural designation from the 50s, and I have his plans for agricultural fencing." Elena's voice perked up. "Agricultural fencing, Marcus, that's perfect. Agricultural structures are protected under state law. They override HOA regulations if the agricultural use predates the HOA formation. So I can build a fence, you can build whatever agricultural structure you need to protect your land. And here's the beautiful part: Karen can't do anything about it. Send me those documents immediately." As I scanned and sent the papers, I felt a plan forming. Karen thought she'd won. She thought I was just another pushover who'd accept her theft quietly, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. And more importantly, she'd underestimated my grandfather's legacy that night. I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook open before me, studying every detail of my grandfather's fence designs. The man had been a genius. What looked like simple agricultural fencing had hidden properties that would serve multiple purposes. As I traced the careful calculations and angles, I realized he'd designed something that was completely legal, utterly functional for its stated agricultural purpose, and absolutely devastating for anyone who tried to abuse the land's boundaries protected. He'd written I would. But first I needed to understand exactly how deep Karen's scheme went. If she'd stolen $50,000 or more from my land, there had to be records somewhere, bank deposits, purchases, something. And if I could prove she'd been running an illegal business on my property, I smiled for the first time in days. Karen wanted to play games with property rights. Fine, but she'd forgotten one crucial thing. This wasn't just land to me. This was family. This was a legacy. And I was about to show her exactly what happened when you messed with both. So Karen was running an illegal cash business on my land, but my grandfather, a farmer and an engineer, left me something better than money, a blueprint that would change everything. See? Grandpa's sketches showed me how to build something special, something that would make Karen wish she had never messed with his grandson. What's the most creative revenge you've ever seen? Drop it below, because what I built next made the entire neighborhood stop and stare. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Every night after work, I studied my grandfather's notebook like it was a sacred text. His fence design was ingenious in its simplicity on paper, It looked like a standard agricultural fence meant to protect crops from deer and provide windbreak for sensitive plants, but the calculations in the margins told a different story. Angles, measurements, material specifications, all carefully noted in his meticulous handwriting. I cross-referenced everything with modern materials, made adjustments for current building codes, and ran the numbers. Again and again, the fence would be 3 meters high, just under 10 feet, which was perfectly legal for agricultural use. The support post would be steel, the frame, aluminum, and the panels. Well, that's where things got interesting. I met with 3 different contractors before finding the right one. The first 2 looked at my plans and shook their heads, confused by the specific requirements. But the third, an older gentleman named Frank, who'd worked in agricultural construction for 40 years, studied the blueprints with growing appreciation. "This is clever," he said, tapping the paper. "Your grandfather designed this." I nodded, and was an engineer before he became a farmer. "Like to solve problems creatively." Frank grinned. "I'll say this fence will do exactly what you say it's for. Protect your property from intrusion and create optimal growing conditions. The fact that it has other properties, well, that's just good engineering." We shook hands and set a start date. Meanwhile, I'd been working with Alina to ensure everything was legally bulletproof. She'd filed all the necessary permits, citing agricultural use and grandfather clauses. The city approved everything without question. After all, I was just building a fence to protect my agricultural land. Nothing unusual about that. The night before construction began, I sat by my window looking out at the lakefront. Another one of Karen's casual events was wrapping up vendors, packing their trucks. While she collected her envelopes, I watched her counting money by her car's dome light, stuffing bills into a designer purse. "Enjoy it while it lasts." I thought tomorrow everything changes. The construction crew arrived at 7 o'clock a.m. sharp. Karen must have been watching, because she came storming over before they'd even unloaded their first piece of equipment. "What the hell is this?" she screeched, still in her bathrobe and slippers. "Good morning, Karen," I said pleasantly. "I'm installing an agricultural fence, all permitted and approved." I handed her a copy of the permits, which she snatched and read frantically. "Agricultural fence. This is residential property." "Actually," I said, pulling out another document, "this land has been designated agricultural since 1952. Grandfathered in. My lawyer can explain the details if you're confused." Karen's face went through several shades of red. HOA rules state that no fence can exceed 6 feet. I smiled. "HOA rules don't apply to agricultural structures that predate the HOA's formation. State law is very clear on that." I pulled out my phone and put it on speaker. "Elena, would you mind explaining?" Elena's voice came through, clear and professional. "Mrs. Peterson, agricultural land use rights, established before HOA incorporation, are protected under State Statute 47(3). Any structures necessary for agricultural purposes are exempt from HOA architectural standards. Mr. Thompson's fence is completely legal." Karen stood, their mouth opening and closing like a fish. Finally, she spat out, "This isn't over," and stormed back to her house. Frank chuckled. "She seems nice." "Oh, she's a peach," I replied. "Let's get to work." The fence went up faster than I expected. The crew was efficient, and the design, despite its complexity, was straightforward to build. First came the posts driven deep into the ground, then the framework precisely angled according to my grandfather's calculations. Finally, the panels, the side facing my property, was beautiful alternating sections of treated wood and decorative metalwork that created an almost artistic pattern. My grandfather had included small shelves and nooks in the design perfect for potted plants or garden decorations. It looked like something from an architectural magazine. The side facing Karen's property, a dull gray-brown that seemed to absorb light, ugly, industrial, and completely utilitarian agricultural fencing doesn't need to be pretty on both sides, Frank noted. With a wink, Karen tried everything to stop us. She called the city, the police even. Tried to organize an emergency HOA meeting. Nothing worked. The permits were in order. The law was on my side, and the fence continued to rise. By the third day, it was nearly complete. The fence ran the entire length of my property line, creating a solid barrier between my land and the rest of the neighborhood. More importantly, it completely blocked access to the lakefront from Karen's side. Her little cash cow was about to dry up, but she didn't know the best part yet. As the crew installed the final panels, I noticed something. Karen had set up a folding chair on her patio and was watching the work with a smug expression. When she caught my eye, she actually laughed. "It's ugly," she called out like a giant tin can. "You think this ugly fence bothers me? I don't need to see your muddy little lake." I didn't respond. I just smiled and waved. She'd find out soon enough. The fence was completed on a Thursday. Friday passed quietly, though I noticed Karen's smugness had increased. She made a point of loudly telling her garden club friends how I'd ruined the neighborhood aesthetics with my industrial eyes. Sore Saturday morning was beautiful, clear skies, gentle breeze, perfect summer day. I spent the morning working in my garden, carefully tending to the plants I'd started placing on the decorative shelves of my new fence. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I heard it, a shriek from Karen's house. I glanced at my watch. Right on time. You see, my grandfather's calculations had been precise. The angle of the fence panels, combined with the specific type of corrugated metal we'd used, created an interesting effect when the sun hit them, just right as the sun moved across the sky, reaching that sweet spot between 3 and 6 o'clock p.m. During summer months, those dull metal panels transvey became a massive reflective array, bouncing and concentrating sunlight directly into Karen's back windows. "What is happening?" I heard her scream through the small gaps in the fence. I could see her patio. The reflected sunlight was intense, creating blazing hot spots that moved slowly across her outdoor furniture, her prized rose garden, and directly into her floor-to-ceiling windows. The temperature on her patio must have jumped 20. In minutes, I continued watering my plants, humming softly inside her house. I could see Karen frantically trying to close blinds, but it was useless. The angle of reflection sent light streaming in from unexpected directions. Her living room looked like the inside of a tanning bed. She burst out of her back door, shielding her eyes. "What did you do?" she screamed. "Marcus, what did you do to your fence?" I looked up innocently. "I'm sorry. Is there a problem?" "It's just agricultural fencing, helps protect my crops from excessive deer browsing and provides optimal light diffusion for shade sensitive plants." "I can't see," she wailed. "It's like staring at the sun." Karen tried everything over the next few hours. Umbrellas on her patio, the reflected heat made them unbearable. To sit under sheets over her windows, the light found ways around them. She even tried hosing down the fence, hoping water would reduce the reflection. Nothing worked. The angle was too precise, the effect too carefully calculated. As the sun finally moved past the critical angle around 6 o'clock p.m., I saw Karen on her phone pacing frantically. Within an hour, a contractor's truck pulled up, but after examining the situation, he shook his head and left. A second contractor arrived, then a third, all left without starting any work. Later, I learned they'd all told her the same thing. The only way to block the reflection would be to build an even taller fence on her property, which would violate HOA height restrictions. She herself had voted for that night. My phone buzzed with notifications. Someone had posted a video online titled, "Ha, Karen Gets Karma by Sunlight." It already had 1 million views. The video showed Karen's house lit up like a Christmas tree, her silhouette visible through the windows as she frantically tried to escape the light. The comments were brutal but hilarious. "This is what happens when you steal from your neighbor's solar power. Justice, dude. Weaponize the sun itself by Monday." The video had 5 million views, and climbing news outlets were calling, wanting to interview the solar fence genius. I declined them all. This wasn't about fame. It was about justice, and we weren't done yet. Every afternoon, like clockwork, Karen's house became uninhabitable from 3 to 6 o'clock p.m. She tried blackout curtains. The heat still made rooms unbearable. She installed awnings. They couldn't block the angle of reflection. She even tried having mirrors installed on her side of the fence, hoping to reflect it back. That just made it worse, creating a feedback loop that nearly melted her siding. After a week of this, Karen looked haggarded. The bags under her eyes suggested she wasn't sleeping well. Good. Maybe she was lying awake, thinking about all that cash she'd stolen. But I knew Karen. She wouldn't give up easily. She'd spent years building her little empire, and she wouldn't let it crumble without a fight. She'd try something desperate, something that would either destroy me or more likely destroy her. I was counting on it every day. At sunset, Karen's house turned into a solar oven. She tried everything, nothing worked. The fence was perfectly legal and perfectly evil, but Karen wasn't done. She spent HOA money on something that would either destroy me or destroy her. Do you think I went too far? Comment below, because what happened at the emergency HOA meeting shocked everyone, including me. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Tuesday evening, just 10 days after my fence had been completed. Karen had spent those 10 days growing increasingly desperate. I'd watched from my window as she met with contractor after contractor, lawyer after lawyer. Her perfectly manicured appearance had started to crack. Her hair wasn't quite as perfect, her makeup not quite as precise. The daily solar torture was taking its toll. But more than that, her cash cow had dried up completely. The weekend events had been canceled. Vendors couldn't access the lakefront anymore, and even if they could, nobody wanted to be associated with the viral solar fence. Karen, her little empire was crumbling, and she was desperate to strike back. The meeting was held in the community center, and it was packed. Usually, HOA meetings drew maybe 20 people. Tonight there had to be over 100. Word had spread about the fence, the video, and Karen's emergency motion to force its removal. I arrived early with Alina, who'd insisted on attending. "She's going to try something," Alina warned. "Desperate people do desperate things. Let me do the talking if things get legal." We took seats near the front, and I noticed Walt sitting a few rows back. He gave me a small nod and what might have been a smile. Other neighbors whispered and pointed as we passed. Some seemed supportive, others disapproving. The fence had divided the community, just as Karen had divided it with her schemes. Karen entered like she was walking onto a stage, carrying a thick folder, and followed by a man in an expensive suit, clearly a lawyer. She'd regained some of her composure, her armor of perfect appearance restored, but I could see the strain in her eyes, the tightness around her mouth. She was hanging on by a thread. The meeting was called to order, and Karen wasted no time. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice dripping with false concern. "I've called this emergency meeting to address a serious threat to our community's safety and property values." She clicked a remote, and a photo of my fence appeared on the screen behind her. This industrial monstrosity was erected without proper HOA approval, in clear violation of our architectural standards. It's an eyesore that's destroying our neighborhoods. Aesthetic appeal. I noticed she'd carefully chosen photos that showed only the metal side of the fence, making it look as industrial and ugly as possible. "Furthermore," she continued, "this fence poses a serious safety hazard. The reflection from the metal panels creates dangerous glare that could cause accidents. I've documented numerous instances of this hazard." She clicked through several photos of her house lit up by reflected sunlight, trying to make it look dangerous rather than simply uncomfortable. I motioned for immediate removal of this illegal structure, and for the board to pursue all legal remedies against Mr. Thompson for violating HOA covenants. There was murmuring in the crowd. Karen sat down, looking satisfied, she thought. She had me. Alina stood up. "May I address the board?" The board president, a tired, dull-looking man named Richard, nodded. "Mrs. Rodriguez, counsel for Mr. Thompson." Alina walked to the front with quiet confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'll keep this simple. Mr. Thompson's fence is 100% legal." She pulled out her own remote and clicked to a slide showing various documents. "Here's the original deed from 1952, showing agricultural designation. Here's the state statute protecting pre-existing agricultural use. Here are the approved permits from the city. The fence is legal. End of story." Karen's lawyer jumped up. "The HOA has the right to enforce aesthetic standards, not on agricultural structures protected by state law," Alina countered smoothly. "Your own HOA bylaws acknowledge this exemption in Section 12, Paragraph 4. Did you not read your own rules?" The lawyer's face wrinkled, but before he could respond, Karen stood up again. "Fine. If the fence is legal, then let's talk about what's really happening." Here her composure was cracking. "Marcus Thompson is conducting a campaign of harassment against me. That fence is designed to torture me with reflected sunlight. It's intentional infliction of emotional distress." Alina actually smiled. "Mrs. Peterson, are you claiming that the sun is harassing you, Mr. Thompson can't control where sunlight goes? If the reflection bothers you, perhaps you should install curtains or move your patio furniture. Personal discomfort doesn't make something illegal." The crowd was getting restless. Some people were actually chuckling at the absurdity of complaining about sunlight. That's when Karen played what she thought was her trump card. "I've hired a professional surveying company to inspect the property lines," she announced triumphantly. "I have reason to believe Mr. Thompson's fence encroaches on community property. I've spent $8,000 of HOA funds to get definitive proof." She gestured to a nervous-looking man in the front row. "Mr. Davidson from Precision Land Surveying will present his findings." The surveyor stood up reluctantly, pulling out a large folder. He unfolded a detailed map on the presentation table. "We conducted a comprehensive survey of the property boundaries." He began, his voice shaky, using GPS coordinates, historical markers, and original plot maps from the city archives. Karen leaned forward eagerly. This was her moment. Our findings show that Mr. Thompson's fence is... He paused, glancing nervously at Karen, completely within his property boundaries. In fact, it's set back 6 in from the actual property line, giving him a margin of safety. The room went silent. Karen's face went white. That's impossible. Check again, ma'am. We checked 3 times. The surveyor continued. However, he paused again, and I saw a sweat on his forehead. However, during our survey, we discovered something else, Mrs. Peterson. Your rose garden and approximately half of your back patio extend 45 square meters into Jefferson Municipal Parkland. The silence in the room was deafening. Someone dropped a pen, and it sounded like a gunshot on the screen. The surveyor displayed an aerial view with property lines clearly marked. Karen's prized rose garden, the one she'd won 3 HOA beautification awards for, was clearly extending into public park property. The encroachment was marked in bright red. This can't be right, Karen stammered. I've had the garden for 15 years. According to city records, the surveyor continued, clearly wanting to get this over with. The encroachment began with a small planting bed and expanded gradually over the years. The current structure includes permanent hardscaping and a gazebo, all on public land. Walt stood up in the back. So let me get this straight. She's been stealing public park land while accusing Marcus of property violations. The dam burst. People started talking all at once. Someone shouted, "She's been charging us for community events on Marcus' private land." Another voice, "I want my camping fees back." The board president banged his gavel, trying to restore order. That's when Alina delivered the killing blow. She stood up again, pulling out a thick folder. "Since we're discussing property violations and HOA funds," she said calmly, "I think the board should know about this." She started passing out copies of documents. These are emails and text messages from 47 vendors who've been paying Mrs. Peterson cash fees to operate on Mr./Thompson's private property. Total collected over $50,000 in 6 months. The room erupted. Vendors in the audience started standing up, confirming the allegations. She told us it was approved. 200 cash every weekend, no receipts. Ever. I want my money back. Karen's lawyer was frantically whispering in her ear, but she wasn't listening. She stood up, her face contorted with rage. "This is a setup. Marcus planned all of this. He's trying to destroy me because he's selfish. That Lakefront should belong to everyone. I made it beautiful. I organized events. I brought this community together. By stealing," someone shouted. "By lying," added another. Richard banged his gavel. Again, order. "Mrs. Peterson, these are serious allegations. The board will need to investigate." "Investigate," Alina interrupted. "Mr. Chairman, we have written statements, bank records, showing no deposits of event income, and Mrs. Peterson is on video collecting cash payments. This isn't an allegation, it's fraud." Karen's perfect composure finally shattered completely. "I did it for the community." She screamed that land was being wasted. "I made it valuable. I deserve compensation for my work." Her lawyer grabbed her arm, trying to shut her up, but she shook him off. "Marcus is a selfish hermit who doesn't deserve that property. I've lived here 20 years. I've made this neighborhood what it is, yeah, a place where the HOA president steals from residents," Walt said loudly. The meeting devolved into chaos. Richard finally managed to restore enough order to call for votes. The results were swift and brutal. Karen was removed as HOA president by a vote of 97-3. A motion to audit all HOA finances passed unanimously. a motion to return all fees collected from use of my land passed unanimously, and finally a motion to require Karen to remove her encroaching structures from parkland within. 30 days passed unanimously. Karen stood there swaying slightly as her world collapsed around her. Her lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, probably telling her to stop talking before she admitted to more crimes. But the damage was done as the meeting ended and people filed out. Many stopped to apologize to me. We should have known something was off. One neighbor said $200 did seem steep for a community event, added. Another, Alina, packed up her documents with satisfaction that went better than expected. Her admission of taking compensation makes this a criminal matter, not just civil. The district attorney will be very interested. As we left, I saw Karen still standing at the front of the room, staring at the projection of her encroaching garden. Her husband had arrived and was trying to lead her away, but she seemed frozen. The queen had fallen and her kingdom was in ruins. Outside, Walt clapped me on the shoulder. You didn't use your fists, you used the sun itself. He chuckled. Your grandpa would be proud. As I drove home, I thought about the fence standing tall on my property. It would stay there, a monument to justice and the danger of underestimating quiet people. Karen had learned a valuable lesson about stealing from someone who had nothing left to lose, but everything to protect. Back at home, I stood on my deck, looking out at my peaceful lakefront. For the first time in months, it was truly mine again. Tomorrow, I'd start cleaning up the damage from all those events. Maybe I'd even rebuild my grandfather's birdhouse. But tonight, I just wanted to enjoy the quiet. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the water somewhere in the neighborhood. Karen was probably packing boxes. Her house would go on the market within a month. I guessed the fence would make it hard to sell, but that wasn't my problem. Justice had been served with a side of reflected sunlight. My grandfather had been right. Sometimes the best defense looks like nothing. Special to those who don't understand, but to those who do, it's a work of art. Was justice served, or did karma just have perfect timing? Let me know below. And if you've made it this far, you're probably wondering what happened to Karen after. Well, she moved away 3 months later, her house selling for well below market value. Turns out nobody wants to buy a house that turns into a solar oven every afternoon. The fence still stands, still reflects, a monument to greed and grandfather's wisdom. What's the most satisfying karma you've witnessed? Share below. I read every comment, and the best ones might make it into my next video about the time another neighbor tried to claim my grandfather's tool.